Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where today we're going to talk about most outstanding player of the Final Four predictions. There's a lot of favorites out there. Obviously, each team has their guy or a couple of guys. But we're going to go through, talk about the favorites, obviously the player who we think is most likely to win it from each team, and then talk about some dark horse candidates, probably one from each team, maybe one from each of us for each team. But obviously, the a pretty cool award that we've seen, some of the great players put on spectacular performances in the Final Four history.
Yeah, and it was a slightly unexpected one last year, I guess. I think a lot of people thought Klingon was going to win it, but he had a pretty tough matchup in the championship against Zach Edey, obviously, and Tristan Newton was able to win it. He had a huge game against Alabama, and then I forget what his numbers were exactly in that title game, but he was spectacular in that. But but yeah, definitely there are some like pretty clear favorites, especially on each team. But I mean, there are some dark horses down the board that I think could eventually emerge. Like we've seen, like 2018 is the one I think of, with like Dante DiVincenzo. Like that was really like his breakout moment. It kind of turned him into a first rounder those games, and he was obviously great all season long. But those two games were like his defining moment in college.
Yeah, and the one that always seems to resonate with me was the last time Duke won it. Actually, when Tyus Jones went off and he won it. He kind of hit that like dagger three, and I remember Bill Raftery basically just like exclaiming that he just won the most outstanding player on that shot. So, um, we're going to see a lot of high level basketball here in this tournament. We'll start with Duke. Obviously, Cody, right? The clear cut favorite. Got to be the favorite. I think he's the betting favorite because obviously Duke's the favorite to win it all right now. Cooper Flag.
Yeah, and like obviously I wouldn't recommend betting him. Is like he's plus 110 to win the award, and Duke is plus 100 to win the national championship. So it's just like if you think he's going to win it, just bet Duke to win the title. It's not really all that much value there. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously the clear favorite here. Especially with the counting stats. I mean, he's averaging like 18, 7, 6, and then a block and a steal, or block and a half and a steal and a half per game. Like he fills the stat sheet. So every single night, I mean, they're gonna look at that and say that he's obviously doing everything that he needs to do for the team, and he's the clear number one pick. The narrative would be there for him as well, and regardless of really how he plays. So there's no denying that if they win it, it's like a 95% chance he's going to end up winning it almost no matter how he plays. But I mean, I think there's some opportunity like for a guy like Con Knipple or even Tyrese Proctor to win this award. Like, especially because that first matchup, I think there's a lot of opportunity for those guys to hit a bunch of threes. Like we've seen Tyrese Proctor hit 7 threes in the game already in this tournament. If he's left open, and like we talked about in the Duke Houston preview, like we think Duke's going to win this game. We think they have some advantages on the offensive end, and it's with guys like Knipple and Proctor like beating this Houston defense over the top. So if one of those two guys goes for 6 or 7 threes in that game and like ultimately wins them the game, like I could see that. I could see one of those two guys winning it if they have a decent performance in the title game as well.
Yeah, I agree. Right. Obviously, Flag probably going to win it. It's not just the stats he puts up, but also just the impact he has on the game. But in a matchup like this, where Houston may like just try and be super physical with him, try and take him away almost, as great as Calvin Sampson is, and force some of these other guys to beat them. As elite as Duke has shot the ball, that's kind of what Houston is willing to give up. You got to beat him over the top. And so Knipple, that was kind of the guy that came to my mind, right? I know Proctor's been shooting it great, but Knipple, right? He's just so physical, getting to the hoop as well, crafty. Like he made a joke the other day, like he's like, I'm not that fast, right? But he just kind of gets the job done. And he's also an elite shooter. So I would look to him probably if you wanted to take someone else other than Cooper Flag on Duke. But, Proctor also fully capable if he plays like he did the first 2 games of this tournament.
Yeah, I mean he's plus 3,500 to win the award, and then you have Proctor at 5,000. And honestly, my throw a few bucks on those guys to win it, just because I can't really choose which guy is going to be the guy to beat this Houston defense over the top. I think it's going to be one of the two, and I guess probably Knipple is more likely. I think he's the more talented shooter. He's the better shooter on the move. So I guess I would lean that way to Knipple at plus 3,500. But ultimately, don't go crazy because Cooper Flag's most likely going to win this award if Duke ends up winning the title. Because in the title game against Auburn or Florida, I think he matches up extremely well. Because I was thinking about this, like with Florida, who's going to guard him off the bounce? Like, would it be Tommy Haug? Like, I think he's probably the most likely candidate, but I don't think he can stay in front of him really on the perimeter. Like, it's not going to be a great Alex Condon game. Like, if he's going to play the four, like he's going to get torched off the dribble. So, and then against Auburn as well, like Auburn's going to have to struggle to play two bigs in that game. Like, you can't put Janai Broom on him, and you're probably going to have to play smaller and play a lot more Chaney Johnson with Janai Broom at the five. So, I think Flag would be in a really good spot in the title game to potentially go for in the 25 to 30 range. And then in that first game against Houston, he has a chance to go for 8, 9, even 10 assists if he's like being that short role creator like we talked about in that first video, and like playing 4-on-3, kicking out the guys like Proctor and Knipple. So ultimately, like Flag's in a pretty good spot to put up like big time numbers, especially in that second game in the title.
Yeah, definitely. Then looking on the other side of that matchup, I think the favorite here, at least in the betting world, is LJ Cryer, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
He's been here before, been to a Final Four, put up big games, had a big game. Against Gonzaga, he had 30. Great player. He's struggled a little bit shooting from the field the last couple of games, but still has hit his fair share of big shots. He's not going to be afraid of the moment. So for my money, I would probably say Cryer, just because of the element of him having been here before. But I think Houston has a bunch of guys, unlike some of these other teams, that could win it, like Uzan, like Juwan Roberts. Even though Roberts has a tougher matchup in this first round game, he still, with his impact, is fully capable of winning it. Maybe even like a guy like Sharp could get really hot and win it. So I think Houston, unlike the other teams, has a bunch of guys that could win it.
For sure. Yeah, they definitely have a bunch of candidates. And if I did have to pick one guy, I guess I would pick Cryer. But the three perimeter defenses that he's going to face are all very good, and they're all really good at defending the 3-point line. So Cryer's going to have to rely on his dribble creation in the pick and roll game, in the dribble handoff game. I think those are going to be his paths. But the guy that they like in those actions a little bit more, I think, is Milos Uzan. He's in pick and roll in like the 97th percentile per synergy. So I do think, especially in that first game, a lot of it's going to be up to Uzan, because Duke will switch a lot of that off-ball screening action in this game with their size and versatility. And LJ Cryer's one of their guys, him and Sharp, that are going to be running off a ton of screens. And Uzan's going to have the ball in his hands for the most part. And I think if Houston wants to win that first game, it's going to be up to Uzan's dribble creation, especially in the mid-range. And then he'll also put up some counting stats assist-wise as well, just because he's going to have the ball in his hands so much. And we've talked about like Roberts isn't in like the greatest of spots. He's probably going to get guarded by Maliwatch in this game. So he's not really going to be able to get to his patented left hook as often as he would want to. So I think if Houston ultimately gets through this and wins the title, is even in that second game, like Auburn and Florida, they force you into the mid-range, force you to score off the dribble. And Uzan is probably the most likely guy. So, he's sitting at plus 2,000 compared to Cryer at plus 800. I would much rather, from a betting perspective, take Uzan.
Yeah, no, Uzan, it's been great, and he has the ability and a little bit more size to kind of deal with those Duke perimeter defenders than Cryer does. And
way more upside defensively too.
Yeah. So definitely, like, the value's probably there, but I may trust Cryer a little bit more. But I think, like I said, there's a bunch of guys on this team that could win it. So we'll see if Houston can get by this. Then I think it's really like up for grabs. Who has the biggest championship game, unless someone really goes off against Duke. But I think, like, if they're going to beat Duke, it's going to be much more of a collective effort.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the voters of this award will tend to gravitate towards who played really, really well in the championship. I think sometimes they'll discount what happened in that first game to get them to the championship. And
Yeah.
like DiVincenzo in that championship game just went off. I don't remember his numbers from the Final Four game, but everyone remembers what he did in the title game. He was fantastic in that game, and that was ultimately the reason why he won it. So I think maybe putting more stock into what these guys are going to do in that one game as opposed to that first matchup, which it's tough because that's the only one that we have to really look into and decide like which players are in better spots. But I do think voters will gravitate towards who scored 25 to 30 in the title game as opposed to that game before.
Yeah, no, definitely. And on the other side of the bracket, Auburn, Florida. Take a look at Auburn first. Clear cut favorite, assuming he's healthy, which it sounds like he's going to at least be good to go. Nobody's 100% at this point in the year anyway, but Janai Broome, obviously the favorite for Auburn. Been one of the best players in the country all season long.
Yeah, and he would be really the only guy that I would consider if Auburn were to win the title. I mean, especially from game one, I think he's in a fantastic spot to put up big time numbers. I mean, he's going to get all the opportunity in the world against Todd Golden's defense that they won't double down on the post really ever. And they did a pretty good job against him in that first game at Auburn, where Janai Broome shot 8 for 19, had I believe it was 19 points, and just wasn't really all that efficient. But he was still kind of coming off of that ankle injury and wasn't completely 100%. He's not going to be 100% here, but at least he's going to have his legs here in this game, and he's still going to have that. He's still going to be able to go over his right shoulder and score with his left hook. So with all of the opportunity he's going to get in that first game, and he's shown that he can put up efficiency against Duke and Houston. Like he's played all three teams. It's kind of crazy that Auburn's played all three teams that are in the Final Four. So, and he's performed extremely well against all three. And he made Houston look a little bit small up front. He was super efficient in that game. He went 10 for 15 from the field and en route to 22 points, I believe. And it wasn't men amongst boys. I'm not going to say that about Houston. I would never say that about a Houston front court, but he did look significantly bigger and provided a bunch of efficiency at the rim. So I think really whatever matchup he gets in that championship game, if they're ultimately able to beat Florida, which is obviously going to be tough, I think Broome is in a really good spot. He could average 25 in these two games if that right elbow's all right.
Yeah, I mean it's Broome's if Auburn wins it all. One dark horse candidate I guess I would throw out there, and this is just because of his polarizing like shot making ability, is probably Todd Pettiford. I mean, he seemed to show up in every big game this year, regardless of like what his minutes are. He might play like 16 minutes and still have 17, 18 points on pretty efficient shooting. The dude just can get a bucket, really. I mean, he can really just heat up quickly, can score points in a hurry. And I guess if Broome isn't healthy, I mean, they're going to look to him for more offense, I would think, if that elbow is a problem. So maybe Todd Pettiford has the ability to get a little bit of uptick in minutes and score maybe like 16, 17 a game in these two games if things fell right for him minutes wise. But, obviously I think it's Broome's to lose.
Yeah, they've relied on Pettiford a lot more, especially in the tournament. I mean, he's gotten over tournament game. He scored 16, 23, 20, and then 10 in the last game on 4 of 12 shooting. But he's getting a ton of volume, and he's going to get a lot of isolation opportunities, especially against Florida. That forces it a ton. And Pettiford showed that he's not shy to take those shots, and he's been a big-time shot maker all season long, especially against the best teams in the country. I just remember that first game against Houston when he really stepped up. I believe he went for 20 in that game. That was really his breakout game, and some people were still like kind of doubting him. I mean, including me, especially at the beginning of the year. Yeah, he went 7 of 12 and 5 of 8 from 3 in that game with 21 points, and just seemed like every single ranked team that he played, he was always in double figures coming off the bench. So I think if you wanted to take a swing on a guy, and Pettiford just got hot for 2 games, which he absolutely can, I think it's not a bad shot to take.
Yeah, no. And then on the other side of that matchup, again, been one of the best players in the country all season long. Walter Clayton Jr., he's been as good and as clutch as anyone in this tournament. Really, him and Tommy Howe really carrying Florida through the last couple of games, hitting some big shots. So he's clearly the favorite here if Florida's to win it all.
For sure, yeah. And it's just all the signature shots that he's made so far in this tournament, all the signature shots that he might make in these next two games is going to ultimately be the reason why he wins this if they end up winning it. So I personally don't think Florida ends up winning. I did pick Auburn to beat Florida, but obviously, I mean, they're a 3-point favorite. They can obviously win this game, and then they can bully anybody on the glass, and Clayton can make shots. He's shown that he can make shots against anybody. I think he's pretty well set up in the first matchup too. Auburn had to play a lot of drop coverage in that first matchup just because Florida was kind of torching them off cuts. I think they scored like 20 points off cuts, which kind of led them to stop and they kind of had to pack it in a little bit more and not really deny the guys on the perimeter. So, and then they had to play a little bit more drop coverage, which when they had to pack it in. So Clayton was able to score a bunch off the dribble, and I think he's going to be able to do that here. And then if they get Duke in the title game, they're going to see a bunch of drop coverage there as well. And Clayton has shown all year that he kills that. So I think he's in a really good spot to score 20 to 25 in both games. But a couple shots that I would take would be on either Alex Condon or Tommy Haug. I think Condon is going to the counting stats he would put up would be in that first matchup against Auburn, because I think he's going to have to take the Janai Broome matchup. He's going to have to be on the floor, I believe, for pretty much not every minute that Broome's on the floor, but I think 30 to 32 minutes. He played 30 minutes in that game against Auburn and did a pretty good job in post-up defense against him. And he really crushed the glass in that game as well. He went for 17 and 10. And I think he could be in line to do that again here in this first matchup. Like, my issue would be in the second matchup against Duke, because I don't really know how playable he is, especially at the 4 against a guy like Flagg. So it'll be tough for him to stay on the floor that much in that game. So it would be more of a Tommy Haug game. So if you're looking to sprinkle something at the bottom, I think it would be Condon or Tommy Haug. I mean, Tommy Haug's he's plus 8,000 right now for how he's played. I think maybe it's worth throwing a little bit down on that.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer Tommy just because of his ability to just hit clutch shots. I mean, he can really do it all kind of on the offensive end. Really versatile player, and he's played really well as of late. Been a huge reason why they've been able to come back in some of these games that they've come back in. So I would lean Haug, but I think it's Clayton's if they do win it. He's already a staple in the One Shining Moment video we're going to see Monday night, and if Florida wins it again or wins it all here, he's going to be even more of a staple. I have no doubt about that.
For sure. I mean, he's just such a big time shot maker. And if the game goes down to the final minutes, he's going to be taking the shots, and that's going to be what the voters remember is him making a big time shot late in the game. So yeah, it would be him. I mean, he's at plus 400, which I think that's basically what they are to win the title. So I don't know if I would actually put any money down on that, but I mean, it would definitely be his to lose if they won it.
Yeah, definitely. So as we've discussed here, in all our episodes too, like this should be a really exciting Final Four. A lot of high level talent, some of the best players in the country, right? Three Naismith Award finalists, right? In Broome, Flagg, and Walter Clayton. So look for this to be an exciting Final Four, with the winner of this tournament likely seeing the most outstanding player go to one of those high level players. But enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.